Welcome back. I've got a special story to share today.
My name is Mabel Jean Harding. I am 24 years old. For 20 years, my grandmother's biological family called me the pot washer. They told everyone I was illiterate, that I could not read a recipe card, and that the only reason Josephine Harding kept me was because she needed someone to scrub the grease traps at closing time. They were wrong about everything except the grease traps. I did scrub them, every single night, from the time I was 9 years old until I was 17. But that is not why Grandma Jo kept me. She kept me because I was the only person in the Harding family who could taste the difference between 3 grams of cayenne and 4. Last month, the woman who called me the pot washer stood in front of 112 people and discovered that the girl she had mocked for 20 years owned every recipe, every trademark, and every franchise license that bears the Harding name. Her own grandmother had made sure of that, with a single piece of paper hidden inside a flour tin for 12 years. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I was found at a Greyhound bus station in Valdosta, Georgia, on March 7th, 2004. I was 3 years old. I was wearing a yellow dress with a torn sleeve and holding a plastic bag that contained 2 diapers and a box of animal crackers. There was no note, no phone number, no name pinned to my collar. The police report listed me as unidentified female minor, approximately 36 months. Patris Hardingwells was at that bus station. She was returning from a conference in Jacksonville and had stopped to use the restroom. She found me sitting on the floor near the vending machines, quiet and still. She told me later that what stopped her was that I was not crying. Most 3-year-olds alone in a bus station would scream. I just sat there, watching people walk past, as if I had already learned that no one was coming. Patris called Josephine. Grandma Jo drove 4 hours from Savannah that same night. She walked into the bus station at 11:47 p.m., looked at me, and said 5 words that changed my life. "This child is coming home." If you have ever been the person no one came back for, type the word "found" in the comments, because someone found me that night, and she never let go. Spring 2004. Josephine Harding was 62 years old when she took me in. She had built Harding Table from nothing. In 1978, she borrowed $200 from a church collection fund and opened a lunch counter in a duplex on East Broad Street. By 2004, when I arrived, she had 14 restaurants across Georgia and the Carolinas, 340 employees, and a reputation that made food critics drive 6 hours from Atlanta just to eat her buttermilk cornbread. But Grandma Jo did not care about the empire. She cared about the food. She taught me everything in that original duplex kitchen, the one with the cracked linoleum floor and the window that would not close all the way. She taught me how to make roux without burning it. She taught me to season with my fingers, not a measuring spoon. By the time I was 11, I could make her signature shrimp and grits from memory, blindfolded, in under 22 minutes. Vivian was 12 when I arrived. Charlene was 10. They lived in a colonial revival house in Ardsley Park that Grandma Jo's money had paid for. Their mother, Patris, was the one who had found me, but Vivian never forgave her for it. I learned this in pieces over the years. Vivian saw me as competition for Grandma Jo's attention, and she was right. But it was not because Grandma Jo loved me more. It was because I was the only grandchild who wanted to learn. Vivian wanted the restaurants. She did not want the recipes. April 2008, my 8th birthday. Grandma Jo made me a coconut cake from scratch, 3 layers. She wrote "Our Girl" on the top in lavender icing. Vivian was there. She looked at the cake and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Why does the bus station girl get a birthday party when she does not even know her real birthday?" The room went quiet. Grandma Jo set down her spatula and said, "March 7th is the day I chose her. That is real enough." Nobody argued, but nobody defended me either. September 2009. I won the county junior baking competition with a brown butter pecan tart I had developed myself. I was 9 years old. The judges called it the most sophisticated palette we have seen from a contestant under 18. Grandma Jo framed the certificate and hung it in the duplex kitchen. When Vivian saw it, she took it down and put it in a drawer. I found it 3 weeks later behind the cleaning supplies. Thanksgiving 2009. This is the one that matters. 35 Harding relatives gathered at the Ardsley Park house. I was seated at a folding card table in the hallway, not the dining room. The hallway. I was 9 years old, eating off a paper plate while the rest of the family sat at the mahogany table Grandma Jo had bought with her first year of profits. Vivian stood up during the meal, holding a glass of sweet tea, and said, "I just want to thank Grandma for keeping Mabel around. Someone has to wash the pots. Not everyone is cut out for the family business, but at least she is useful." Charlene laughed. Patris looked at her plate. 23 adults said nothing. Grandma Jo was in the kitchen checking the turkey. She did not hear it, but I heard it. I sat in that hallway and ate my paper plate meal and memorized every face that laughed. I was 9 years old, and I already knew that this family had drawn a line. Blood on one side, me on the other. Grandma Jo knew. She always knew. She saw the way Vivian looked at me like I was furniture. She saw how Charlene copied Vivian's coldness because it was easier than having her own opinion. She saw how the family treated me at every holiday, every reunion, every company picnic, always the helper, never the guest. But Grandma Jo did not fight with words. She fought with paperwork. In June 2012, when I was 12, Grandma Jo called Roland Devereaux, her attorney of 30 years. They met in the duplex kitchen because Grandma Jo did not trust offices. She sat at the flour-dusted table where she had rolled biscuit dough for 34 years, and she signed a document that transferred every piece of Harding table intellectual property, the 87 original recipes, the trademark, the franchise licensing agreements, into a trust with one beneficiary. Me. I did not know about this until 12 years later. Grandma Jo never told me. She put the document in a sealed envelope, slid it into the flour tin on the top shelf, and told Roland, "When the time comes, she will be ready. And when the wolves come for the meat, this paper will be her teeth." Roland kept a certified copy in his office safe. He checked it every 6 months. For 12 years, he sat on the most important document in the Harding family's history, and he never said a word. Not to Vivian, not to Charlene, not to me. Meanwhile, I kept cooking. By 14, I was running the prep station at the original Harding table location on East Broad Street. By 16, I was developing new menu items. The smoked Gouda mac and cheese that became the chain's bestseller in 2014, that was mine. The peach bourbon glaze that food bloggers drove 200 miles for, mine. The brown sugar cornbread that Southern Living magazine called the single best side dish in the American South, mine. Vivian put her name on every one of them. She would walk into the restaurant with a food journalist, point at the menu, and say, "These are Harding family recipes I have been perfecting since I was a girl." She never mentioned me, not once. I graduated high school in 2019 with a 3.94 GPA. Nobody in the Harding family came to the ceremony except Grandma Jo. Vivian was getting a facial. Charlene was at a wine tasting. Patris sent a card with $50 and a note that said, "Proud of you, honey." No exclamation point, just a period. Grandma Jo took me to Waffle House after the ceremony. She ordered a pecan waffle, looked at me across the table, and said, "Mabel, I am going to tell you one thing, and I want you to remember it for the rest of your life. The people who ignore you today will need you tomorrow. And when they come, you do not owe them a seat at your table. You only owe yourself the truth." I wrote that sentence on an index card and taped it to the inside of my locker at the Culinary Institute of Charleston, where I enrolled that fall on a full scholarship. Fall 2019 to winter 2024. What the Harding family believed about me during those years and what was actually true could fill 2 very different books. Vivian told people I had dropped out of culinary school after 1 semester. She said I was working at a diner somewhere in South Carolina, barely making rent. She told Charlene that I had called Grandma Jo begging for money and that Grandma Jo had finally cut the cord. None of this was true. Not a single word. I graduated from the Culinary Institute of Charleston in 2021 with highest honors. I finished first in my class of 127 students. My thesis project, a reinterpretation of Low-Country cuisine using West African fermentation techniques, was published in the Journal of American Culinary Arts. I was 21 years old. After graduation, I spent 2 years working 14-hour days in restaurant kitchens. I staged at a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York for 3 months. I worked the line at a farm-to-table operation in Asheville, North Carolina, where the head chef taught me how to think about food as architecture. I saved $43,000 in 2 years by living in a studio apartment that cost $675 a month and eating staff meals. Some nights after closing, I would sit on the back steps of whatever kitchen I was working in, smelling the grease on my forearms and the cold city air, and I would think about the duplex. I would think about Grandma Jo rolling biscuit dough at 5 a.m., her hands moving in circles she had made 1,000,000 times. I would think about the hallway and the folding table and the paper plate. The missing never went away. It just got quieter, like a radio turned low in another room. In 2023, I opened a small pop-up dinner series in Savannah. I called it Found Table. 20 seats, no signage, reservations by word of mouth only. The first dinner sold out in 9 minutes. The second sold out in 4. By the 6th dinner, there was a 400-person wait list. The Savannah Morning News ran a profile with the headline, "The most exciting chef in Savannah has no last name on the door." They did not know I was a Harding. During these years, I called Grandma Jo every Sunday at 7 p.m. She was 77, then 78, then 79, then 80. Her voice got softer each year, but her mind stayed sharp. She would ask me about my recipes. She would tell me about the new manager Vivian had hired, the 3rd one that year, who could not tell the difference between file powder and garlic salt. She would laugh and say, "They are ruining my cornbread, Mabel. They are using imitation vanilla." I can taste it through the phone. I called her 223 times in those 5 years, almost every Sunday. I missed 2, once for a 103-degree fever and once because a storm knocked out the power for 3 days. During those same 5 years, Vivian called Grandma Jo 11 times. Charlene called 14 times. I know because Roland counted. He had Grandma Jo's phone records subpoenaed as part of the estate preparation. 11 calls in 5 years from the granddaughter who claimed she was devoted to family. 14 from the one who said she was always there for Grandma. 223 from the girl they called the pot washer. January 14th, 2024. Grandma Jo had a massive stroke. She was 82 years old. She collapsed in the duplex kitchen alone at 6:15 in the morning. The paramedics found her on the floor next to the stove, her hand still gripping a wooden spoon. She was rushed to Memorial Health. The doctors said the damage was extensive. She could open her eyes, but she could not speak. She could squeeze a hand, but she could not sign her name. I drove from my apartment to the hospital in 7 minutes. I did not remember driving. I just remember walking into the ICU and seeing her lying there, so small in that white bed, with tubes in her arms and monitors beeping in a rhythm that sounded nothing like the rhythm of her kitchen. I stayed at the hospital for 9 days straight. I slept in a chair next to her bed. I read to her from the Bible, the same passages she used to read to me when I was small. Psalm 23. Isaiah 41:10, the one about not being afraid because God is with you. I held her hand and told her about the pop-up dinners, about the wait list, about the food critics who said my low-country stew was the best they had ever tasted. She squeezed my hand 3 times. That was our code. 3 squeezes meant, "I love you." I pressed my palm against the back of her hand and felt the bones beneath the skin, fragile and warm. This was the hand that had rolled 10,000 biscuits. The hand that had signed a $200 loan in 1978 and turned it into 14 restaurants. I held it, and I did not let go. Vivian arrived on day 3. She walked into the hospital wearing a cashmere coat and carrying a leather briefcase. She did not ask how Grandma Jo was feeling. She asked to speak with the hospital administrator about end-of-life estate procedures. Charlene arrived on day 4. She brought flowers and a lawyer. On day 5, Vivian did something that I did not discover until 3 months later. While I was in the hospital cafeteria eating a turkey sandwich, Vivian entered Grandma Jo's room with a notary she had hired privately. The notary was not licensed in the state of Georgia. Vivian placed a document on Grandma Jo's bed. It was a transfer of all Harding Table intellectual property, the recipes, the trademarks, the franchise agreements, to Vivian Harding Cole. Then Vivian took Grandma Jo's hand, the hand that could barely squeeze, and guided it across the signature line. The mark on that paper was not a signature. It was a trembling line that started as a letter and dissolved into nothing. But Vivian had it notarized. She filed it with the county clerk the same afternoon. She believed she now owned everything. She believed the pot washer had been permanently locked out. She had no idea that the flour tin on the top shelf of the duplex kitchen contained a piece of paper that made hers worthless. If you have ever watched someone steal from a person who could not fight back, type the word justice below. Because justice was coming. Vivian just did not know it yet. Grandma Jo died on February 28, 2024 at 4:17 in the morning. I was holding her hand. The monitors went flat and the room became the quietest place I have ever been. I sat there for 22 minutes before I told the nurse. I needed those minutes. I needed to say goodbye to the only person who had ever chosen me on purpose. I pressed my forehead against her hand. Her skin was cool. The room smelled like antiseptic and the faintest trace of vanilla because I had rubbed vanilla extract on her wrists every day. It was her favorite scent. It was the scent of every kitchen she had ever commanded. Roland Devereaux called me 3 days after the funeral. "Mabel, I need you to come to the duplex. There is something your grandmother left for you, and I need you to see it before anyone else does." I drove to East Broad Street. The duplex kitchen looked the same as it always had. The cracked linoleum, the window that would not close, the cast-iron skillet hanging on the wall, seasoned by 46 years of use. Roland was standing by the shelf, holding a stepladder. He pointed to the flour tin on the top shelf. "Open it," he said. I climbed the ladder and lifted the lid. Inside, buried under a layer of flour, was a sealed envelope. It was yellowed with age, but intact. My name was written on the front in Grandma Jo's handwriting. Inside was the 2012 IP transfer document, every recipe, every trademark, every franchise license, all of it legally and irrevocably in my name. My hands shook so hard that flour fell from the envelope like snow. I read the document 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time, because I could not believe it. Roland handed me a second envelope. This one was a letter from Grandma Jo, written in 2012, 12 years before her death. It said, "Dear Mabel, if you are reading this, then the wolves have come for the meat. Do not be afraid. I watched you grow from a girl on a bus station floor into the finest cook I have ever known. You have my recipes in your hands because you have them in your heart. The others want the name. You want the food. That is why it belongs to you. Do not let them make you feel small. You were never small. You were always the biggest thing in my kitchen. Love, Grandma Jo." I sat on the kitchen floor and cried for 40 minutes. The linoleum was cold under my legs. The afternoon light came through that broken window and landed on the flour tin, and for a moment I could smell her cornbread in the air even though the oven was cold and empty. I was not crying because I was happy. I was crying because she had known. She had always known, and she had spent 12 years making sure I would be protected. Then I stood up, called Roland, and said 4 words. "What do we do?" March 16th, 2024. Roland Devereaux had been preparing for this moment for 12 years. He had the original 2012 document. He had certified copies stored in 3 separate locations. He had digital scans with blockchain timestamps. He also had something else, the evidence of Vivian's forgery. The unlicensed notary. The hospital security footage showing Vivian entering Grandma Jo's room with the document. The medical records proving that Grandma Jo was incapable of informed consent at the time of signing. Everything Vivian had done in the dark, Roland had documented in the light. The annual Harding Table corporate dinner was scheduled for that same evening at the Savannah Convention Center. 112 employees, 14 franchise owners, the entire Harding family, every local food journalist in the Lowcountry. Vivian had planned it as her coronation. She had a speech prepared announcing herself as the new CEO and sole owner of Harding Table intellectual property. She had ordered 200 bottles of champagne. She had rented a podium with the Harding Table logo etched in gold. I did not plan to confront her that night. I went because one of the franchise owners, a man named Curtis Wright who had been with Harding Table since 1996, called me that afternoon and said, "Mabel, I know Vivian is announcing herself as the new owner tonight. I just want you to know that every recipe in my kitchen came from you, and I think someone needs to say that out loud." That phone call changed everything. I arrived at 6:45 p.m. wearing my chef's whites. Not a gown, not a suit. My whites with the Harding Table name embroidered on the chest, the same uniform I had worn since I was 14 years old. Vivian was at the podium when I walked in. She was mid-sentence, thanking the Harding family for their unwavering support. She saw me and stopped. She blinked. Then she recovered and said, into the microphone, "And of course, we must acknowledge the support staff who have contributed to Harding Table over the years. Mabel, thank you for your service." 112 people turned to look at me. I walked toward the front of the room. My shoes were quiet on the carpet. I could hear my own breathing. I stopped 6 feet from the podium and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "I am not here as support staff, Vivian. I am here as the owner." The room did not gasp. It went so quiet that I could hear the ice melting in the water glasses on the nearest table. Vivian's face changed. I watched it happen in stages. First, confusion. Her eyebrows drew together, then amusement, a half-smile as if I had told a joke. Then uncertainty, the smile freezing as she scanned my face for signs that I was bluffing. Then the smile dissolved. Her jaw loosened. Her grip on the podium tightened until her knuckles went white. Her eyes dropped to the folder I was holding. Then they rose to my face. Then they dropped back to the folder. Roland stepped forward and placed the 2012 IP transfer document on the podium. He also placed the forensic analysis of Vivian's forged document, the one she had extracted from a woman who could not speak. He placed the hospital security footage printout. He placed the medical certification of Grandma Joe's incapacity. He placed the unlicensed notary's revoked credentials. He placed it all in a neat, organized stack, the way Grandma Joe would have arranged her recipes. Vivian looked at the stack. Her hands were trembling. Her voice came out in a whisper that the microphone caught and broadcast to every corner of the room. "That is not possible. That tin was just flour." "It was never just flour," I said. "It was 12 years of Grandma Joe making sure the right person inherited her life's work." Charlene was at table 9. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Vivian, what is she talking about? You said the transfer was legal." "You said Grandma signed it willingly." Vivian did not answer. She was staring at the hospital footage printout, at the image of herself guiding Grandma Joe's limp hand across a piece of paper. 112 people saw that image. 14 franchise owners saw that image. Every food journalist in the room was already taking notes. "You stole from her," I said, and my voice did not shake. "You stole from a woman who could not lift her own hand. You forged the signature of the person who built everything you have ever claimed as your own. And you did it while I was eating a turkey sandwich in the cafeteria, 40 feet away, trusting that no one would hurt her." That same evening, 9:12 p.m., Vivian did not speak for 11 seconds. I counted. Then she said the only thing she could think of. "She was my grandmother, my blood, not yours." I looked at her. I felt something I did not expect. I felt sad, not for myself, for her, because she genuinely believed that blood was the same as love, and she had spent 20 years proving that it was not. Then Vivian said something I was not prepared for. Her voice cracked and dropped to a whisper that the microphone barely caught. "You do not understand. You walked in, and she looked at you the way she never looked at me. I was her blood, and she chose you. Do you know what that does to a child? I spent my whole life trying to be enough for her, and she gave everything to the girl from the bus station. For a moment, I saw the 12-year-old girl who had watched her grandmother fall in love with someone else's child. I saw the wound underneath the cruelty. It did not excuse what she had done, but it explained it. You are right, I said. She was your blood, but I was her choice. And Grandma Jo believed that what you choose matters more than what you inherit. But Vivian, she did not choose me because she did not love you. She chose me because I was the one who showed up in the kitchen. Roland addressed the room. He explained the legal chain of custody. He explained that Vivian's forged document was inadmissible and that a fraud investigation had already been filed with the Chatham County District Attorney. He explained that every Harding Table franchise license, every recipe, every trademark was legally and irrevocably held in trust for Mabel Jean Harding. Vivian left the podium. She walked through the silent room, past the 200 bottles of champagne she had ordered for her own coronation, past the podium with the gold-etched logo, past Charlene who would not meet her eyes. Her heels clicked on the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a clock running out of time. 3 months later, the fraud case was settled. Vivian was barred from holding any position in a Harding Table entity. She was not charged criminally because I asked the DA not to pursue it. Roland disagreed. He said she deserved prison. I said Grandma Jo would not have wanted that. Grandma Jo would have wanted what she always wanted, for the food to be right and for the people to be fed. Charlene came to see me in May. She stood in the doorway of the duplex kitchen, the same kitchen where she had laughed when Vivian called me the pot washer. She looked smaller than I remembered. I should have said something, Charlene said. At Thanksgiving, at all of them, I should have said something, and I did not. No, I said. You did not. Can I come back? She asked. Can I work for you? I looked at her for a long time. You can come back, I said, but not as a Harding. As an employee, you will start in prep. You will learn to cook, and if you earn a place at my table, it will be because you deserve it, not because of your last name. She nodded. She started the next Monday. She was terrible at first. She could not dice an onion evenly. She burned the roux twice. But she showed up at 5 a.m. every day, and she did not complain. By August, she could make Grandma Jo's buttermilk biscuits from memory. Vivian called me once in September. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. She said, I am sorry. I said, sorry is a word, Vivian. It is a starting place, not a finish line. She said, what do I have to do? I said, you have to live with what you did. I cannot fix that for you. I can only decide what I do with what Grandma Jo left me. I did not close the door on Vivian. But I am the one who decides when it opens. Today, Harding Table has 22 locations. We serve 11,000 meals a week. Every single recipe on the menu was written by hand, either by Grandma Jo or by me. The duplex kitchen on East Broad Street is still standing. I kept it exactly the way it was, the cracked linoleum, the window that will not close, the cast iron skillet on the wall. The flour tin is still on the top shelf. It is empty now. The document is in a frame on my office wall. This morning, I woke up at 4:30 a.m. I drove to the duplex. I turned on the stove. I made a batch of buttermilk biscuits using Grandma Jo's recipe, the one she taught me when I was 9 years old. I set the table for one. I ate those biscuits with butter and honey, and I listened to the birds in the garden, and I thought about a woman who drove 4 hours in the middle of the night to a bus station in Valdosta to bring home a child who was not hers. I thought about how she hid the most important document in her kitchen, inside a tin of flour, because she knew that the only person who would ever look inside a flour tin was someone who actually cooked. I miss her every day. The grief does not go away. It just becomes part of the seasoning. But every morning when I walk into a Harding Table kitchen and I smell the roux and the cornbread and the vanilla, I know she is still here. Not in the name on the building. In the food. Always in the food.
I hope you enjoyed this tale. Please subscribe to support the channel. Goodbye for now.